We're diving into the metaverse with Bing Gordon. He's the genius behind EA Sports and advisor to Bezos.
What's your opinion on VR? Do you have maybe a quick thought?
Let's see. So the primary use of VR headsets right now is a cheap home theater.
Yep.
And that's kind of Asia. And then then there's the you are there experience. Since the early days of EA, when we look backwards, the first 2 years of every console cycle, we would convince customers this time it's real. And my daughter is more your age. She looks back at the games of the '80s and, oh my God, did you think this was good? And it was kind of like stick figures, and it's or not even Looney Tunes. And but the first 2 years of every 6-year cycle, this time it's real. And we found that higher resolution graphics made a difference, and speed, 60 frames a second, visuals and kind of 20-second or 20 millisecond visual response to button pushes. That was kind of the number one you are there is response time to inputs.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two is surround sound. And we found that surround sound and rapid response was actually more engaging than the goggles. All the way back to Jaron Lanier in the early first round of VR. The problem was nobody wanted to put on a headset that smelled like Jaron Lanier's hair. He had like cornrows that were washed like once a decade. Guy's brilliant, but nobody wanted to smell his hair. And however, the promise of VR is that you are there. And so far, I think location-based VR works better than sit-down VR.
Yeah.
With things like the Void, I'm on the board of a company called Dreamscape.
Yep.
And when you can walk a little bit, suddenly, and then when you can touch stuff, when you feel a heat lamp, but you see a picture of a fire, you feel like you're close to a fire. Mm-hmm. When you get a little spray on your face, you feel like it's kind of water, you're near a waterfall. And it goes even so far as when you walk and the Void had a thing where you walked in a circle, but it showed you straight in the headpiece. So you felt like you were going for a 200-yard walk. And then that the most compelling thing in the Void back then is they had 6-foot high or 7-foot high plywood walls with shitty carpet on it. But the visual display, when you reach out and touch it, is you're touching rune carved stone walls, and you touch it and you'd feel stone.
Yeah.
And then in Dreamscape, they had a thing where you walk up to the plate in the movie. Wasn't The Natural? I don't know, the movie, which baseball movie, and you hear the soundtrack from the movie, and you feel like you're on home plate. Mm-hmm. So the you are there. This is a long-winded way of saying VR has a you are there. When you're standing on top of a cliff and you look down 1,000 feet, even though your brain knows you're on a flat floor, mm-hmm. Your body is telling you don't take that step. And as near as I can tell, that never goes away. Whereas the you are there of audio-visual flat screen presentation always gets pierced in about 2 years. It's kind of like, if you think The Wizard of Oz, that moment in the movie when Dorothy pulls back the curtain and Oz says, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain." Well, from 1978 on, at the first kind of Pong and Atari VCS and Fairchild Channel F, all the way up to the current Xbox and PlayStation. And to say hello, you'd always pierce the veil in about 2 years. Thank you. And so far, the good parts of VR seem unpierceable. However, and with you talk about 2015, with better technology, there's less sickness, as you take away the lagginess. So there's still this miracle, but the problem is the miracle doesn't work so well when you're sitting still.
Hmm.
When we did a Chuck Yeager flight simulator. It was EA's first #1 game in '86, and and Chuck Yeager, we called it Chuck Yeager's Way of Flying, and we wanted to convince players that they were learning to be a test pilot. And Yeager at one point said, "You call this a joystick? That's not what I call it." He's pretty funny, but what he said is, in test piloting, when you go into like a flat spin or you have some kind of a problem, you have to simultaneously do the cognition, and the instruments help on that, but you got to go through a checklist really fast. But you got to feel your butt. He said, if you don't have a good butt, you can't be a test pilot. And
Interesting.
and we kept trying to give that that sense of a butt, and you can see when that illusion is being created when people playing the game start doing this. So when we were playing in Sega Genesis NHL hockey, there was one year we all got really sore thumbs because we were pressing the button to make the guys go faster. Come on, come on, come on. And you're leaning in, and we all got hockey thumb. And then in Tiger Woods golf one year we did marionetting, and people would say it's helping my swing, because you could click the button, you could see Tiger do this, and you'd feel like, yeah, I'm learning to keep my head down, I'm learning to do my hand. And so that kind of
You see that
the
in shooting
illusion.
games. I'll lean around the corner in a shooting game, even though there's nothing there to look through.
Right. Yeah. So but anyway, so the future of VR has got to be how do you keep the butt kind of in the experience and get the butt in the experience. And we've now got, with VR, at least we've got performance so people don't get nauseous. But you need to be untethered, and then you need to get this You Are There experience. There have been a couple of good ones. The Blue from Weaver Labs was underwater scuba diving, but they did it wrong. There's a good 12-minute version of it at Dreamscape, which was saving a baby whale. For somebody like me who doesn't like the experience of ears below 30 feet with a scuba tank, feeling feeling weightless was pretty cool. And it's a little more compelling feeling of weightlessness in goggles than on a flat screen. And there was an early thing, I think it was from Facebook, where you had to and then it was a third party as well, where you had to kind of fly through space, to fix a wrecked ship. And that was kind of cool. But a spaceship, and you're kind of space station, and you got little jets and all that. And that was kind of compelling. So the VR delivers weightlessness, and certainly on the Void, when they did this Mayan temple thing or Inca temple thing, when you're walking across a plank across 100 feet up in the air, or you go over a cliff and look over the edge, that's pretty compelling. But for whatever reason, for whatever reason, the VR developers haven't figured out how to overcome the limits of the hardware device. And the best, I think Gabe Newell, I used to think he was the best tech designer of all time, because in Half-Life, he ended up feeling like the physics technology they had was pretty good. He made these kind of weird angular creatures, and actually hid the limitations. Kind of the way Pixar, every generation of Pixar movies had more lifelike characters, but when you saw kind of a Bug's Life, you thought they were being real, and you didn't stop and work backwards to realize the best that their technology could do at the time was insect carapaces, couldn't do skins and eyes.
Yeah.
And so there's been no great tech designer yet for VR. And I got involved with Magic Leap and also saw Meta a little bit. And it's the same issue on AR. There hadn't been great tech design. The way that it did originally with making the Z-axis move quickly, with Doom and Quake and Wolfenstein.
Mm-hmm. How much of that do you think is a hardware versus the actual content design problem? Because, for example, have you played golf now on VR?
No, I played
Sorry,
a lot.
golf.
I played a lot of golf games all the way back and helped design a few of them. But no,
You would, if you take anything away from this conversation, go play Golf Plus in a VR headset. It's
okay.
unbelievable. They just put in Pebble Beach, and they're working with PGA. But I can't really play it for more than maybe 45 minutes without having someone come.
And how do you do the swing? Is it click, click, click like Tiger Woods or PGA?
No, full swing, and they have a grip attachment, so you can actually attach a golf grip to the end of the controller. Really cool.
And then it uses sensors like the Nintendo Wii.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a standard controller.
Because the Oculus doesn't have forward cameras, right? It has forward cameras, but the cameras probably can't read your hands.
They do a little bit of some smart estimation for when you go behind your head. But overall, like, I play golf and it feels very good. And in the future,
that's interesting.
Yeah, in 10 years, these cameras or these controllers will have cameras, so that'll be solved. But they do a really good job of estimating where your swing is.
So now all you got to do is convince somebody that it's fun to put ski goggles on when you play golf.
That's the issue. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Well, this was an aha for me with AR.
Mm-hmm.
And, with AR, you have to believe when you go to the trouble of putting on goggles that your world gets better. And when you take them off, you go, shit, it's back to normal. Mm-hmm. And maybe the way some people feel with alcohol, it's, and I have some alcohol, suddenly I'm in a better world. And certain, maybe pot's the same way, but you kind of need to feel like I'm now in a richer world when I put on the goggles. And I think VR is ultimately you are there. And AR is not the experience that you are there, because it's not an illusion. You can see stuff. Mm-hmm. It is, your world gets better.
And you're on the board of Niantic, or just what's your relationship?
Yeah, just a helper. Just a helper.
Yeah.
I met Henke. Actually, the guy who's his head of marketing was a former EA guy named Mike Quigley. And I talked to Quigley. He left EA and he did a little payment startup that got bought by Google. And then within Google, he went from that to Keyhole. And what Henke had done, and Henke kind of had done map stuff. And I can't remember the name of the book, but his head of marketing wrote a book about kind of Henke's startup that turned into Keyhole, then got the Google Maps. Mm-hmm. And about that same time, well, I'll go way back. I got into the games business for virtual worlds. And in the 70s in college, I did stand-up poetry, before there were poetry slams. And I had one poem about a magic piece of glass that would sit on my table. And it's kind of like a computer screen now, but it's just, in my mind, it was just a clear piece of glass. But when I put my head close to it, I could travel through time and space. And I worked at Disneyland summer out of Cranbrook. Yeah. And they let us we did intramural sports in the park before it opened, and then afterwards. And so had this fantasy of what if the audio animatronics came to life, in the off hour. So that plus plus my poem, and after my poem came out, the movie Westworld, the original.
Yeah.
So early on, I thought, well, wouldn't this be great? I called it an adult virtual Disneyland, and that would be compelling for grown-ups. Not is grown-ups don't believe in the illusion of Disneyland except through their kids' eyes. I want it to be something that grown-ups believe in. And when I first heard about home computers, I went, this could deliver my magic piece of glass.
Wow.
So now called the Metaverse. As interesting, I've been in. I don't know. You want to talk about the Metaverse?
I'd love to hear about you as much as possible if you want to sprinkle the metaverse. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay, well, so I got with the first. Let's get meta about Metaverse, and so the third iteration, what I call the third iteration of the Metaverse, is starts with Neil Stephenson.
Yeah,
because he named it, and he also thinks the current utilization of the word is kind of pretty phony. He has a pretty crisper definition of what he meant. And I think the metaverse right now has started to be used as a fundraising tool, like the information superhighway was used in the 90s. And it was just, it sounded like something. Al Gore used it. And basically it was this brand name for led by the phone companies who needed to raise money to fiber optic the world.
mm-hmm.
And then EA was Electronic Arts was the benefit of this brand at the time, because there was about 5 years of people thought games are the on-ramp to the information superhighway, which then bid EA stock up. And then people thought, oh, games aren't the information superhighway is a joke, and EA stock went back down. So to get meta about meta, so I think the kind of Metaverse 1.0 is the human illusion, because humans illusion of time, of cause and effect, and even living real time is kind of all made up. And you could test it with all kinds of optical illusion tests when people are sure they see something and they don't. There's all kind of psychology tests about eyewitnesses, and there's even one, and I thought the name of the book was A Human Illusion, but something I read in the 90s, which is you can prove the time it takes a signal to get through your synapses from your nerves, through your synapses to your brain. It has quite a delay in it, and a lot of milliseconds delay. So even the illusion that we're living in real time is kind of and there's an illusion of self. So that's kind of the level one metaverse is the human illusion, and that is that we exist in real time, that time is directional, that even cause and effect and all kinds of stuff. The second illusion I'd call the fictive illusion, and this is, I think books are the MVP of the fictive illusion, the minimum viable product. And so this is, movies are as well. Probably Greek drama was as well. When we use medium to transport people, but you transport kind of in the eyes and the mind, and it is kind of that you are there when it works, but you're there inside a protagonist, and inside a story. And then I think Neil Stephenson, he meant the metaverse to be the place illusion, that you're actually in a different physical place. And so I would, I wish that we'd think about metaverse as the digitally created alternate place, one or another. So, that's 3D worlds. But by the way, if it's not digitally created, it's Disneyland, it's Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, the coal mine, where in location-based VR can do it, where you have this physical experience of being someplace else. And
is the difference between level 2 and level 3 that level 2 is not physical and immersive, whereas the third one is physical.
Yeah. You don't have the feeling you're physically in
Yeah.
level 2. Maybe that first iconic moment in movies where people in a theater saw just a train rushing toward them.
Yeah.
But there you feel like you're in the middle of you're in the middle of an act, and you identify, you empathize, but it's you don't have this feeling of physically being there. Whereas in these real place illusions, like Greenfield Village, where I grew up in Detroit, it was Henry Ford just built this kind of 1915 walk the streets of America with horseless carriages. And that is, it's really expensive to build. You could have built a digital thing with zero maintenance cost. You don't have to go oil stuff and all that, but you could, the real estate's free. And, but back in the days when the Museum of Science and Industry was building a coal mine, and probably, today that it cost $100 million to build. And you could do the same thing digitally, kind of in Unreal, probably in 5 people years. And then at the maintenance cost would be the cost of compute on AWS, as opposed to the carrying cost of something like Museum of the Science Industry and keeping it up with docents and cleaning and power and all that. It's going to be kind of 1,000x carrying costs. So metaverse in general. So if you think about the place metaverse, the level 3, let's start with the benefits. And for me, the number one benefit of a virtual world, and this is pretty meta, is I wanted to live multiple lives and kind of untrammeled multiple lives. And I also wanted to live a random access life as opposed to a serial life. And by that, I mean, the way we live life is very much like an audio cassette. And, you can't really speed it up, or listen to a book on tape. One thing happens after another. And random access, instead of an audio tape, is a hard drive, and you can jump in at any point in time. And so in games, we have save and restore. So if you ever played Civilization, you go, okay, I'm going to start at kind of 3000 BC, and oh my God, the Visigoths just crushed me. Okay, by 1000 BC, I'm going to go back to 2000 BC and do it differently. And so I kind of love the fantasy, in my own life with kids. Photos and videos are kind of a proxy for it. But I'd really like to go back for an hour to one daughter's 5th birthday. We kind of sit around the dinner table and remember it and pull out pictures or something like that. But I'd rather be there than look at, the 10 photos at the time. Or in this day and age on Instagram, there'd probably be 1,000 photos. But actually walking around it would be way more exciting. So, and then the other thing about, all these, or at least the fictive and the place metaverse, is you can experiment with identity. And I've come to believe that there's 3 ages of gamers. There's the preteen age, which is about physical mastery and agency. And I first heard in a focus group in the 80s, 10-year-olds say, my teachers tell me what to do, my parents tell me what to do. In games, I get to decide what to do. And then watching kids, but especially boys, coming to grips with their changing bodies, that in games they can feel more coordinated. And so, for the preteens, when they're watching Marvel Character Universe, big, I'm the Rock. And then the teenage years are about identity exploration.
Yeah.
And today's generation, with all kinds of fluidity, has much less friction and identity exploration than probably the British did in the 1800s, or the Indians did in the 1900s with the caste system. But still, a 6'4" guy with a beard can shave a beard, but he's always going to be 6'4". And
Not in the metaverse.
in about well, in the late 90s, Lara Croft was the first game that where boys would play a female avatar. And interesting enough, about that time in EA Sports, the EA Sports designers said, well, player is just kind of a set of attributes. And I tried to convince them that the EA Sports players would like to customize not just the stats, but the way their characters look. And they went, no, that's dolls are for girls. I said, haven't you heard of action heroes? And they go, no, that's different. We put in customize your avatar in Tiger Woods Golf with Game Face, and sales went up by half.
Yeah.
And the whole team said, well, boys don't want to customize their avatar. And I took one kid named Mike Olson, who turned out to be a really great producer over the next decade, but took him over to Maxis and saw all the power of avatar creation in The Sims, and he got True Religion, went back and put it in. So what I've seen, I pay a lot of attention to this with father and daughters, but boys, by the time EverQuest came out, right around the turn of the century, 48% of the female characters in EverQuest were played by boys. And there was this transition to, well, I'm never going to play a female avatar, said the boys, to, when I play a female avatar, people are more generous to me. And then it was, when I play a female avatar, it's more fun to watch than a dude. So why wouldn't I play a female avatar? To now, there's no negative connotation. It's just kind of, practical. Sometimes it's fun to be a female barbarian, and sometimes it's fun to be a male barbarian. And, over 20 years, the emotional affect of identity, of gender identity in games has been dramatically reduced. I think even Republicans probably play female avatars. And in games, not just in real life.
I can go ask someone in the street in Naples, Florida. Trust me, that'd be easy. And last night I was listening to the Bankless podcast, and they had CryptoPunk 6529 on it, and he's using a voice disguiser. You have no idea what he looks like, or she. I really don't know. And the whole hour-and-a-half podcast is done through a voice disguiser. And it's really interesting to think that that person's making a career out of this essentially Disney IP character they've created and have put into the real world with some sort of personality.
It's kind of in the future. So let's see, a couple of thoughts for you. So state of the art of Metaverse today. It's all about kind of what's the structure that pulls you in. So in my world, the number one structure that pulls you in is games. World of Warcraft's my favorite game of all time. Ready Player One is all built on a game. Fortnite is a game. So the game, the rules of the game and the heat of the game pull you in. And the place is secondary. The place is something that you discover as a way to succeed in the game. There's another kind of metaverse, which talked about Chuck Yeager, but it's simulations as a structure, which is to learn the rules of the world, learn the rules of the world. And what I've found in simulations with Madden football and with Sim City and less degree with the Sims, but in flight simulators, that expert players, the first thing they do is come in and try to explore the bounds. And, in a flight simulator, you see, can I go off the edge of the map? Can I check gravity? In football, can I screw up the AI? Is the turf different somehow or not? Is bunting on AstroTurf different than bunting on grass? So what we found in simulations is whatever it takes to win, we can convince people that's real. So with SimCity, to have a valuable city, you had to master the water layer and the power layer. And people came away from that thinking, well, this is the way power works in cities. And so there's something about, and maybe scientists say that because it's beautiful, it must be real. So Einstein, before he could prove it, it felt beautiful. And so he thought, therefore, that it must be right. Well, in a simulation, instead of it's what it takes to succeed is what you end up believing is real. And then I got involved with Linden Labs, a Second Life company, and Second Life and things like Sandbox VR and Decentraland. Geography is the structure.
Yeah.
And we did it in Sims Online. We found once we put a world and you could pick where your land was, players imputed value to different locations, even though there was no value. In SimCity, or in Second Life, at least, there's a little cost of going from place to place. But so the imputing value in the map. My sense is about 10% of gamers love maps. And a bunch of people don't, but a higher percent of gamers love maps than there are map collectors in the world. When I grew up, the AAA would give you a marked map, and when we'd take road trips in the family, the navigator would sit in the car with the map and tell everybody where to go. So we kind of fell in love with maps. And then there's, I think, I think you were doing it, but there's in the work from anywhere era, I work with a company now called So Work that's trying to do office simulations, so work from anywhere, but give you a sense of presence. And so presence as a structure, it kind of is the underlying benefit of Zoom, is that everybody's present. But this whole notion of using virtual reality, even on a flat screen, it's surprisingly, especially for the digital generation of people under 30, there's something about having a cube, having some of your trophies in your cube, having spatial sound. So when somebody walks up to you on the screen, you hear them differently as if they're coming closer. There's something about that, this in-between presence, that is creating value for people. And it might be that it's generational, that people who've grown up digital now think that you can get a lot of the benefits of being physically together, being virtually together, and some others seeing the 3D. And I saw this as at USC in the early 2000s. They did an Arabic simulator based on Unreal Engine. So it was a 3D shooter engine. And they found that they could teach raw recruits, army volunteers who they're going to send to the Mideast. They could teach Arabic in a simulation at zero marginal cost, twice as effectively as with a one-on-one Berlitz instructor.
Believe it.
Because they had to go in and what I remember at one point, they would not only talk, but they'd pick physical gestures. And at one point, they had this little quest, and there's a woman in a town about the size of Fallujah with a flat tire. And as a U.S. Army person, you're supposed to go up and show that you're there to help and kind of get help points, because ultimately you want to get to the town elders. And so if you can get everybody like you here, and so there's all this hullabaloo because she's blocking an intersection, and here comes a GI, all dressed up, and you've got to convince them in body language that you're there to help. And the one I remember is then an elder comes in and goes, "Are you CIA?" And you go, "No." and they take out a gun and shoot you. And what you have to go is "No," with kind of an umpire safe sign.
Wow.
And that means really no. And if you just go no without doing the arms, it means I'm lying. And
Fascinating.
so that's that they call that presence as a structure. And then there's something about haptics as a way to, certainly we've seen it in location-based VR. It does help that you are their illusion.
Mhm.
And then I talked about the other structure, which is overlays, and that was the core idea behind both HoloLens and Magic Leap, but they got it wrong all along. It's partly because they thought they were consumer products that they were going to be able to sell for $300 to $500, and ended up being 3,000, and suddenly they had a whole different app they had to sell. So that's a metaverse wrap.
You
I
could
think it's really interesting thing what the future is. So, we talk about the future. Clearly, the I think the VR future is all this stuff is battery life. So you need to be untethered. But still, you need to have safe walking around. And so I think right now I'm pretty excited about location-based VR.
Hmm.
The business model hasn't been worked out, and to get haptics and cameras right now, I've seen it in kind of what Dreamscape did, but also what Amazon did with Just Walk Out stores. That the math of cameras is getting so good that the price of lenses can come way down. So when the Void first came out, to cover like 40 by 40 foot area, and with kind of VR resolution of kind of plus or minus 2 or 3 inches accuracy, there was $400,000 worth of cameras in the ceiling. And then I think now that could probably be done for 10,000, and in 5 years it can be done for 200. And I think Amazon in their stores, they took away all the physical sensors and just did it with cameras. And I suspect, in China apparently has all kinds of citizen scoring based just on cameras. So the once you have multiple cameras, so they can, as you talked about with the golf game, that they can infer actual location and get the z-axis highly accurate. And that's kind of all math. I saw that all the way back with the stuff that Kleiner sold to Microsoft for their visual thing. They had Prime Sense and then bought some 3DV from Kleiner, and 3DV was math and Prime Sense was parallax. And math is scalable and parallax a little less so.
The hardware. Yeah.
So that's going to make a big difference. A couple other interesting things in the future is wondering what Chat GPT is going to do, both for the fictive illusion, but also the avatar illusion. And that's the avatar illusion may get created by a combination of large language models plus better renderers. And I learned early on that the problem with skin and the problem with marble and the problem with art in general, patina, is all that stuff has subsurface light scattering, which is hard to do with computers. The way computers do it is they give you a solid kind of a solid plane or facet, and then they do particles, and the particles lay on top. And in real life, we actually, in skin, the reflection comes kind of at multiple layers, and nobody can do that in computers yet. And then there's another thing in the future of the metaverse that is, broadly speaking, the law hasn't caught up yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to see in my lifetime the law starting to recognize virtual worlds as as physical real estate. And we're going to, so in the early 2000s in Pennsylvania, there was a citizen lawsuit against Linden Labs trying to hold Linden responsible, treat it like, you've kicked me out of Second Life, but I paid, and therefore there's no such thing as eminent domain, and you're treating it like eminent domain, and I'm going to sue you. Well, they lost.
Yeah.
And then similarly, and there's a bunch of digital platforms right now that are replacement for movie theaters, physical movie theaters. And then I think in the 50s, there was a consent decree where movie studios were not allowed to own movie theaters. And because the law recognized that there was kind of a physical monopoly, and as well as this content, so they untied them. And at the time, there was a thing. It was tying where to get the hot movie for a movie theater, you had to take a couple of shitty movies, and that kind of sin led to this consent decree for the movie business. And for whatever reason, elected officials in the 50s understood physical real estate, and elected officials in the 2020s don't seem to even understand email, let alone digital real estate. So I kind of think that as this digital generation grows up with Metaverse as kind of a second reality, that the law is going to follow 20 years behind.
Mhm.
And then the ultimate of AR is basically something that looks like Oakley cycling glasses, with all the power and all the compute embedded in an earpiece. And right now you got to do a cable down to a battery pack, and the magic leap is kind of pretty horsey. Nobody would wear that in public if they ever wanted to get lucky. And but when I was a kid, people felt that wearing glasses was kind of four eyes, and it was if you wore glasses, it was an invitation to get beat up. And then later on, people start wearing glasses just to look more legit, without even lenses in it. And then over time, I think going from, wow, do you want to have one pair of glasses? Now glasses is a fashion accessory, and now glasses with tasks. So if you think about glasses, I have reading glasses and driving glasses. People have sunglasses to reduce glare. They certainly have fishing glasses for polarized to see through. You got, motorcycle helmets and all kinds of windshield glasses. And I think
Farsighted.
there's going to be a time in the future where we just take for granted you have your you are there glasses and your make the world a better place glass, and they're going to be different because the technology is so different. And also the masking and power requirements are pretty different. But so I think we're going to look up, and AR and VR glasses are just going to be new kinds of sunglass equivalents coming in at all kinds of prices. And sooner or later, it's we can imagine people with brains capable to electronics and eyes with physical implants. So I think that's already starting to happen as well. And as weird as that sounds, it's not. I don't think it's a whole lot different than getting a knee replacement or a heart stent. So it's just various levels of human augmentation.
And over time, humans will become adapted to it. Last question here. Do you think that those levels 1, 2, and 3 are linear, or do you think that that's circular and 3 goes back to 1 over time?
Let's see. Are they linear in history? I think they are. Because the first one is this sense of self. I think
Our history that we recognize, that's true.
in human history.
Yeah.
there's a linear history that the human illusion sense of self probably went all the way back to
Descartes.
kind of first humans, and then stories kind of, you know, with storytelling around the fire and, you know, pull people in. And then the before there was digital, you know, for me, there was Disneyland and Greenfield Village before there was World of Warcraft and Sims Online.
Yeah.
So I do think, you know, this is an era of time. And then yeah, the sense of self and the human illusion, I think once you know, once you start experimenting with identity and place, it, you know, the more meta you get in the metaverse, it does have some kind of recursive understanding of the other two. And I found teaching kids lit club in 7th and 8th grade that the best way to teach literature was to abstract the story and explore it in different media. And, you know, there's this older generation sense that the book has value in itself. And, you know, for kids who are kind of transmedia, it's no, imagine, you know, Journey to the Center of the Earth as a movie, imagine it as a game, imagine it as art in a museum. And how do you do the characters differently? It turns out I even had one kid do this with D-Day, and it turned out the protagonist, the characters you follow in D-Day is different in Medal of Honor and different in Stephen Ambrose and different in the Tom Hanks movie. And then you start realizing, oh, it's just a choice. Once you have a story, you know, if it's 3 acts, at 5 acts. Are there a lot of characters? Are there individual characters? Is it one character on a journey? And there's different habits in different formats, but in the end, you've got kind of the core story. And I don't know. So when you get meta about stories, you end up with Joseph Campbell.
Right.
And you end up with exploring the same story in transmedia. I found it with 7th and 8th graders back then. When I asked them, you know, what did you remember from the book that you read last night? They'd look at me blankly, and then I'd say, which page would you start the movie on? Which actor would you cast as this character? And then it's and what music would play under this page? And at one point, I realized the kids realized they could remember soundtracks from movies they'd seen 5 years ago in particular scenes. And my daughter was playing back the Shagadelic theme song last night. She remembered that, and she
Austin
can't.
Powers, or
Yeah, she can't remember you know, if she reads a fiction book, she can't remember something that she read last night.
yeah, that's so funny.
I need to jump.
Awesome story. Thanks for sharing your story from Magic Glass to having all this knowledge. You could definitely do a dissertation on it. I appreciate that thing.
Yeah, and let me know what you're up to.
Gonna be something cool pretty soon.
Oh, good.